Okay, everybody. Hi. Here we are with three grown-ups again. This time it's a podcast with just the three of us. We will have a guest on our next podcast, but today we have our normal cast of characters. Ardina Seward, camera woman extraordinaire for ABC television, the first African American camera woman in America in news, and a graduate of NYU and Columbia University, and the amazing Dr. Victor Sternberg of Briarcliff Manor in New York, a very well-read, thoughtful, intelligent intellectual, and my humble self, Bob Pargament. And with the three of us have been doing this podcast a number of times now. We're continuing it, called Three Grownups, and we're talking about the state of America today and the world today. So Vic, we were just talking before we started recording about what this article was talking about. Do you mind starting from the top?
Yeah, the article is written by a fellow named Ryan Cooper, and it is a very serious indictment of our country. And I think one of the things we fail to understand is that we are creating an image of America as a country not to be trusted, not to be an ally. We're able to insult other people, want to take over countries we don't have, that we have no right to take over, cut aid to people who depend upon it because somehow it doesn't fulfill our mission as our foreign service mission, helping people with AIDS or whatever. And we are really treading on an attack on the division of government between three branches. And Donald Trump recently said that because he's here to save America, nobody should stop him. And those are very serious words that were uttered by a number of dictators in the 20th century for their own purposes and causes. And the fact that there's not a hue and cry on the Republican side and we as maybe middle of the road people don't even have a spokesman that can speak with the vigor and intensity that a response that's required today. I can't be a politician, one of the typical players. We need a voice, and we don't have one. And it's serious because Donald Trump is drowning out all competition and everybody sitting on the sideline, particularly the Republican Party, which is exhibiting profiles and cowardice like I've never seen in my life. That's what I have to say.
And that's a number of years of being around, as we all have. The three of us, between the three of us, we have, what is it, 230 years or so between us.
Yeah.
And That's quite a statement to make because they're all living in fear. This is what happened, with the putsches in Germany and other dictatorships. They intimidate the opposition, in this case, the Republicans, by threatening primarying tactics against them, and that which means that they're only really interested. This is not, the Patrick Henry, I regret that I have but one life to live for my country mindset. This is, how can I get reelected again? They're only interested in their own well-being, and not the well-being of the democracy. Ardina, what were you going to chime in with?
Well, it's at the point where it's hyperbole, and the sky isn't falling yet. I think what we're already starting to see, regardless of the gloom and doom scenario, is we're starting to see pushback. So far, a lot of things that Trump has tried to implement are now in court. Congestion pricing is a good example. He says congestion pricing is finished, but it's not finished because people still have to pay the congestion pricing toll, and it's now being litigated in court. So a lot of things that he claims are already a done deal, that's just his PR, is not a done deal. So the good thing is that we're starting to see the vitality of our court system, which has never been tested to the extent that it has now at this moment, but it is, and that's a test of our democracy. Another good bit of news is that his rating has dropped. I wouldn't say it's dropped considerably, but his MAGA supporters are starting to scratch their heads and say, well, wait a second, this isn't what we voted for. We voted for the economy, and this guy is going off on a tangent into some other direction. So to make I'm not going to belabor the point, but in regard to what Vic was saying about not having a leadership in the Democratic Party now, he's correct. But I think that in the going forward, what you're going to see is a unique coalition of disaffected Republicans and Democrats that at some point just may come together and start to agree on what to do with this guy, because he's not going to follow through with a lot of things that he's promised the people who voted for him, promised his so-called constituency. And when these people wake up and they say, we've been sucker punched, then that's going to be a new awakening and a new political awareness. So it's no longer us and them, it becomes us, a coalition of us.
But that's looking down, that's looking beyond this moment. What we're seeing right in this moment is what Vic just said. This is a coalition of the unwilling, of cowardice that is not standing up. So I mean, that fundamental piece that would force his hand maybe to do something different, possibly, is not being done. And the damage that what he's doing is he's fire hosing the entire system. He's throwing so much simultaneously. This was Steve Bannon's concept that he discussed with him before the last presidency that he had, to bombard the public's mind with and the system with so much overwhelm that the system and the media can't really keep track of it, can't focus. And there's some truth to that. As I've said before to many people, as a hypnotist, I know there's many ways to hypnotize people, one of which is a confusion induction, to overwhelm the mind, so that the conscious mind becomes sort of, it retreats from, if I gave you a series of rapid math problems, your mind would not be able to keep pace with it. So your conscious mind retreats and the subconscious mind comes to the fore, which is much more suggestible by definition. And he's doing his own version of that. And they knew they were doing that because they spoke to it. Bannon called it, Ezra Klein wrote about it a few weeks ago in the New York Times, called it, hitting them with muzzle velocity, that there is going to be so much outrage, so many outrageous acts that people can't even respond to it. So what damage has he done already? Courts aside at this moment, he's put in people like Pete Hegseth, guy who should never be in charge of the U.S. military, has no credentials. Tulsi Gabbard, another one, no reason to be in charge of U.S. intelligence. Bobby Kennedy Jr., the anti-vaxxer guy who takes dead animals and plants them in Central Park and was a heroin addict, as the head of Health and Human Services. So the damage is already done. You may be looking at what you perceive to be the bulwarks that will defend against this, but there's a lot of damage that's already been done. It's so. Please, I'll stop. You guys talk now.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the thing is, the question remains that these guys, the Tulsi Gabbards, the Hegseths, the Patels, as of today,
right?
The Kennedys are in office, but so far, what have they done? Now, I mean, that's
less than a month.
Oh, but that's the whole point. That's the point that I'm making. Hegseth has already gotten considerable blowback. It'll be interesting to see how he handles the Ukraine situation, which is about to explode, because if Ukraine goes, then that signals all across Europe that they could be next. So that'll be the Hegseth test. If there is a disease outbreak equivalent to COVID, let's see what Kennedy does. As I said, there's nothing we can do about the fact that they are already in office. And you're right, Trump has railroaded these people through. But the next stage is, what can they actually do? It's one thing if they're there, but it's another thing if they can enact any kind of legislation. It's another thing if they can enact anything. I mean, what are they going to do?
Bob, I'd like to speak up about that, because I think that there has not been a really uprising of those of us who feel this strongly and have felt somewhat disconnected from the Democratic Party, but are absolutely horrified by what's happened now. And the MAGA people have taken the stage. They walk around with their hats, they cheer, and it's time that the American people who feel differently had their voices heard. Demonstrations, speeches, I don't know what it takes, but the Germans went quietly into the night. Those who disagreed kept quiet. Those who wanted to be part of the parade joined and committed atrocities. And everybody looked the other way out of fear or self-interest.
Yes.
Cannot let this happen in our country. This is too serious an assault. I think it was Nathan Hale who said, "Give me liberty or give me death." I think we have to take that kind of motto and somewhat expand upon it, because that is, this Make America Great thing has become a catch-all. We need something that will catch people in a different way, whether it be give me liberty or give me whatever it takes. Because, just to backtrack a little bit, the president wants to stop New York State from doing something that's a state's right. I thought we believed in states' rights in America. The president can't go into Alabama and say, "You know what, we don't like guns anymore, or we like abortion. We want you to let women have abortion." That's the state's right, is it not? How
Right.
can the president call himself believing in states' rights and tell us in New York what to do with pricing things? What
Yeah.
right does he have to do that? He has no right. And
Yeah.
somebody should tell him those words. If you believe in states' rights, you're full of you know what, because you don't believe in states' rights. You believe in an imperial presidency.
But it shows you the intellectual and moral bankruptcy of this movement that supports him. Because you're right, this has been the rhetoric. This has been one of their key talking points, states' rights. And here he's just saying, as he did about his reverence for as Republicans talked about their reverence from law and order. Where'd that go after when January 6th, when cops were killed, cops were assaulted? It shows you the shallowness of their rhetoric, that it was never really believed, it was never authentic, and so yeah, I think we are just in a new place altogether. And when I think about the phrase MAGA, by the way, I always wondered, wasn't America great before? We had our problems, of course. We was still an evolving nation, but overall, pretty high accomplishments in key areas. Led the world in technology, in medicine, life expectancy up here, crime at an all-time low, or a very low point compared to other periods in our history. A pretty good quality of living overall, not for everybody, no question about that. There's no way to sugarcoat, the entire picture. But overall, a pretty solid, pretty admirable country. So one guy comes along and says it's not so great. The man who has more money than anybody should ever have in life, more privilege, given more privilege, born with the biggest silver spoon in his mouth, he tells you this country is not so great. Why? As a pretext to coming in and taking over and taking everything that he can. So people are just gullible. That's really kind of the theme in all of this, I think. The ignorance, the lack of critical thinking that people have, especially in this day and age. And that's another subject I'd like to delve into in this podcast, as to what's going on with the American mind. We can look at Trump and he's the obvious villain in all of this, but the public has enabled him to be this, right? Not a majority, a plurality of voters, 49 point whatever percent it was that he got this last time. What is it about Americans that they're okay with this?
Well, Bob, you know what? Let's not forget history. In Germany in 1930s, early 30s, they had a Weimar Republic, an attempt at democracy.
Right.
They went through hyperinflation. The people rejected the Weimar Republic. 33% of them voted for the Socialist Party, and Hitler got the job. It wasn't that 100% of the people voted for him, but they had a chance. They saw a failing democracy, and they saw a guy that was going to make them great again. And we have a country where we had somewhat of whether you like it or not, an inept Democratic Party that alienated a lot of people because a lot of the nonsense they just got caught up with their own rhetoric on the left.
Grandstandard stuff. I agree.
And so enough people, 10%, go from voting against Trump, say, to hell with this woman and Biden, and I'm over. And now they've thrown their will out in. I do not believe that the majority of Americans support Donald Trump. And I think there's going to have to be, we have to galvanize people to stand up. And I was just thinking what I'm going to do. My congressman is Mike Lawler right here in town. And he was elected because we redistrict the area. I'm going to go speak to him because I'm not going to get into any other issue except the one issue that is clear as a New Yorker. What right does the president have to override our state legislature for coming up with this bill? Do you believe in state rights or not? Suppose Donald Trump said that every New Yorker has a right to carry a gun. Does that mean every New Yorker has a right to carry a gun?
Right.
If abortion in New York is to be outlawed, does that mean we have to follow him? So I'm going to ask him that question. Do we have states' rights in New York, or can the president override them? And if he can, what rights do we have? And I'm going to try to nail him on that issue because he's a sleazy kind of guy. You know, he comes out, he wants to get reelected, and he's in a liberal district, but he kind of snuck in because they redistricted and they took in some people further north. And we have to do something with the people that we can influence, that we can begin to have them speak out. Otherwise, we'll tell them they're not going to get reelected.
He's in hot water right now. You know, Lawler's in hot water because he made a comment about a Latino politician, Jose Alvarado, who is with the Westchester. Alvarado's a Westchester County legislator, and he's out of Yonkers. But he immigrated to the States as an adult from the Honduras. And there was a general meeting of Westchester County legislators, and Lawler was there. And Lawler asked Alvarado if he was a citizen. And that happened a couple of days ago. There was a demonstration today in regards to what he said, and the major news outlets picked it up too. So he's on the spotlight.
Well, we got to keep him on the spotlight. We have to do with those, because remember, New York State has a number of Republican congressmen that got elected because of redistricting. And if they think that Trump is the answer to reelection, maybe it's time we make them know that we are the issues. Because you know what? I voted for some Republicans because I rejected some of the Democratic viewpoints, not Trump, but some others. And I'm going to let me know that myself and people like me will not support him if he does not stand up to Donald Trump on Ukraine, on New York, the issues that really matter. I work with a Ukrainian laboratory. These guys live in Mount Kisco, and they came from Ukraine, and I talked to them, and their hearts are really broken. They're afraid for their country. And these are hardworking American citizens who were born in Ukraine. You know, they get ignored. I mean, this is so outrageous. And it's the silence of the rest of us that is allowing this to happen. That's my viewpoint.
But here again, you know, I don't see that much movement on behalf of the Democratic Party as far as engaging the working class. You know, we had talked about this before, that the Democratic Party has still morphed into the party of the elite. And when you consider the fact that only 36% of the United States has a college education, that is on par with Egypt. I mean, this is not to cast dispersions upon Egypt, but this is a first world country. The United States has a 30% of the people in the United States have college degrees. And it was the other percentage that saw Trump as their rescuer. And those are the people that voted for him. And there has not been an outreach. There is still the Democratic left, which says defund the police. There's still the Democratic left that wants to have green space as opposed to other spaces that would help poor people. And they just haven't, I don't think that they've learned their lesson yet. There was one thing that stuck out is that in this election, I believe the statistic was 1/3 of Latino males voted for Trump. 1/3, which is an increase from the Biden election. And that is a trend that is going to continue.
Well, I don't know about that. Let me just counter with that. I think that Democrats obviously put up a flawed candidate, or certainly a flawed presentation of this candidate because of Joe Biden's unnecessary hanging on to office when he should have left. I mean, when I saw him as a person who's voted mostly Democratic, I have voted for Republicans before, but when I saw him in that debate, I knew it was time for him to leave. That was it. I knew before that, and yet he hung in there. So they rushed in this woman without her being contested in any way, because everybody was so desperate. So it wasn't so much that people, I think, gravitated towards Trump for Trump. They also voted against the lackluster and rushed situation with the Democrats. So, I don't think this was an enthusiastic MAGA endorsement of this guy. And from what I'm hearing, bits and pieces, a lot of MAGA voters are now having regrets about this, because now they're seeing what it actually looks like. But having said that, the damage, the dismantling that this guy can do and is doing, talked about, I think, how many trillions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars he's going to take out of the Pentagon, or Hegseth is going after it. What will that do? What will it do? What will Trump's people leave in their wake, in terms of national security, in terms of the environment, in terms of food safety, in terms of all these things as they deregulate the hell out of this country? So these people, I think, are going to get a rude rue the day that they went for him. So go ahead, Vic. What were you going to say?
About talking about the working class people. This is where the Democrats blew it when it came to the tax cut 217. I calculated my secretary's salary gain after 2017 tax cut. Now that tax cut lowered the marginal rate from 39.6 to 37, almost 3%. Okay. My secretary, who makes $72,000 a year, her decrease in tax was $16 a week. $16 a week. Yeah. $800 a year. Now, there's a basketball player that plays for the Boston Celtics named Brown. He makes $60 million a year.
Right.
The tax cut for him amounted to about $1.8 to $2 million a year he saved in federal taxes. And my secretary saved $16 a week. That's where the Democrats blew it. They didn't say, American people, you think he cut your taxes? Let me tell you, it really worked. Yes. And don't go give some vague. This is what this guy got, and this is what you got at $72,000 a year. And you think, who's the chump here? You voted for this guy. So he gave you a tax break? It's a joke. Why don't you go and ask your boss for a $16 a week rate? If he said, I'll give you $16 a week more, you'll laugh, you'll quit. That's what the president did. He gave you $16 a week and gave this guy $2 million. And you call that, what they call trickle-down economics? Tell it to my secretary. You can't pay gas. Sometimes you pay a rent.
Yeah. So this makes a very important point, I think, which is that, this is not team sports. Too many people fall into this paradigm of, my team versus another team. I'm not referencing the Boston Celtics guy. I'm just talking about the state of politics, a zero-sum game, winner takes all, right? People think that because, that we can feel this visceral resentment and fear about what Trump is doing, that we automatically side with the Democrats. I am strongly upset about how the Democrats have handled this, that they don't know to this day how to fight a good fight like the Republicans will fight. They will bring a flamethrower to a political battle, and the Democrats bring a butter knife. It is just beyond explanation why, in this day and age, knowing who your enemy is or who your opposition is, that you don't bring the right fight to this. It's something that is odd to me. The days of Robert Strauss and Vernon Jordan, when they headed up the DNC, they knew how to fight. They knew how to take down their opponents on substance. But you know what? You're right. They should on this tax bill, they should have pointed out that Trump added $8 trillion of debt, another Republican hypocrisy here. but they didn't. So what the hell's wrong with the Democrats? What is fundamentally lacking?
Bob, they're schizophrenic. On one hand, they think they represent all the downtrodden. They're there to help all the people at the low end, take care of minorities, take care of the poor, and have equality in America, so racism disappears. And so as long as they hold on to that as one of their touchstones of what they stand for, they can't turn around and represent you and I. You can't have it both ways. What Harry Truman said when they asked him about, do you ever take the middle of the road position? And Harry said, what belongs in the middle of the road are dead dogs and yellow lines.
Right.
Cannot be in the middle of the road and kiss the ass of the far left, anti-Israeli, socialist leaning, and also represent me. You can't do it. If you want to, you can't kiss all the girls. And the problem is they've been kissing the girls on the left and telling us they really care about us. And they have to give them up. Because they cannot. The middle of America is ignored on both sides.
Well, it's been said the Democratic Party is the difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party at this moment is a Democratic Party campaigns on opposition, on opposing everything, but the Republican Party is more unified around concrete bread and butter issues. And that's one of the differences in strategy, because you're not going to see a bunch of Republicans massing in the middle of Times Square with thousands of people, but you're going to see the Democrats out there, Democratic protesters, massing in Times Square with signs, getting arrested, thinking that's really going to do something. I mean, as far as the visual is concerned, yeah, you have to have people that are going to turn out. But as far as a movement, it just isn't happening. It really just isn't happening at all. As a matter of fact, it's sort of branching off to the fringe element that are being given credit. There was a riot in Borough Park last week because Hamas, along with other left-wing groups, marched into Borough Park and started calling the Hasid community Zionist, among other words, and they thought that they had easy targets. Well, the Hasids started fighting back. The cops came in, people got arrested, and you didn't hear a peep, not a peep from the Democrats saying, this shouldn't be done. I mean, how do you have the gall to march into Borough Park and just start calling people Zionists?
Well, the same gall you have to march into Harlem wearing white capes and calling racist remarks to black people in Harlem. Would that get the news? You damn met it with the Democratic Party be out there in a second. But this double standard of racism in our country, we're done with it. I don't want to hear any more about it. We've been down that road. We'll never be a perfect society. There'll always be tribal politics. People will like their own. There are opportunities for everybody. It's not a level playing field, but it ain't going to get better by forcing it on people. It doesn't work anymore. Those days are done.
Well, plus the fact you have to give it to, I mean, maybe bite my tongue, but you have to hand it to Trump to this point. And this is what's feeding the MAGA people. What has Trump done that's concrete so far? One, he's managed to secure the border to some degree. So that means that shipments of fentanyl are much less. He also has managed to round up a lot of criminal, illegal migrants who have been shipped back to their home countries, which is a good thing. I mean, the bad thing is that law-abiding migrants may get swept up, which is not right. But the point is that there are the gang members, the gang formation, a lot of them are being shipped out of the country, gone. And that doesn't mean that Macy's and CVS is now protected from shoplifters, but at least there are some things that are being done in the affirmative. Congestion pricing, which may get knocked down. On one hand, it's a good thing because I guess it does help curtail air pollution. But to a guy who's barely making $70,000 a year delivering flowers from the Bronx to Lower Manhattan, he's almost out of business. So by fighting that, he's helped out a lot. And that's been neat. for the
At what
MAGA.
cost? At what cost? Look.
Well, at what cost? It's on one hand, they're saying people have to take public transportation. Well, you're going to put some 70-year-old grandmother on a train at 10 o'clock at night, traveling to visit her daughter in Bushwick. It's not a good idea. If they make the subway safe, which they have not made the subway safe, what alternative are they giving people?
What do you think it costs to go across from the Throgs Neck Bridge to the George Washington Bridge, go from Queens to Bergen County in a car twice a day, back and forth commuting? Do you have any idea what the tolls cost?
You're gonna get a bank loan.
Yeah. But that's okay. That's okay that we can take people's tolls and make them confiscatory. But if we want to try, and I'm not going to go one way or the other. We want to make New York. I drive to New York. It's a zoo there. Getting a car into New York is impossible. Okay. And let me tell you something. If I have a business and I can get faster down to the city and out of the city for $9 a day, it may not be the end of the world. Yes, the guy that makes $50,000 a year, it is confiscatory. But the same guy that goes over the bridge has got a bigger problem. And at least the intention was to make New York less crowded. It had some positive benefits, and there's a price. Anytime you do anything that will change the formula, there's going to be a price to be paid. And I get it. I object to the president telling us in New York what to do, just like the people in Alabama don't want President Biden to tell them, that they should have abortions for their children, for their daughters. This is about our fundamental rights. And I think it was coming, this thing with Nathan Hale, give me liberty or give me death. How about we have shirts, give me liberty or give me Donald Trump?
You're on. That's a great idea.
Underneath that, Donald Trump equals death. I think that would be just a way to explain that word.
I think one thing that we have to consider, we have our issues here, but watch Europe very, very carefully, because Europe is kind of the bellwether of Trump's future. The Ukraine, which is very vulnerable at this time, has now sort of become the poster child of Trump's abuse abroad. And what you're seeing behind the scenes is you're seeing a very slowly forming coalition of European countries coming together to not only rally behind the Ukraine, but to support the Ukraine, not only to send them money, to send them equipment for the war, but in protest against Trump. Now, how that's going to work out economically with the tariffs, I don't know. But somewhere down the road, that's going to impact trade. It's going to impact the stock market, the tariffs. But this is probably I don't remember any other period in history. You guys would probably know better than myself, with the possible exception of World War II, where you've seen this divide between Europe and the United States. I mean, all the old handshakes, the pats on the back, the exchange of gifts between countries, it's not happening anymore. I mean, America's becoming an isolationist country. It's not the worst thing in the world, but in this day and age, because since we live in a global society, digital, internet, the whole 9 yards, it's just not going to work.
Let me just say, this could be the worst thing in the world. There's a very worrisome component about this, which I'm sure has been written about. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it's been written about, that by doing this kind of 180 realignment, aligning yourself now with this brutal dictator, whenever these seismic changes take place, there are consequences for it. In other words, will the NATO countries now be more triggered by moves that Russia does, thereby increasing the likelihood of some sort of miscalculation or misstep where something nuclear goes on, because they're feeling more threatened. Their big brother partner, the United States, who has just willy-nilly abandoned them now, they're going to feel more vulnerable. I get it from my friends over in Europe who write to me. It's like, what's happened to the United States? Where they used to be our friend, now all of a sudden he's cozying up to this sociopath named Putin. Of course, sociopaths seek out their similar, their like kind. But what can that do? If you see now Russia make yet another move, and of course this guy is empowered to do that, or will be empowered to do that if Trump turns over all of his ill-gotten gains without any kind of say so for the Ukrainians. Aren't you as France or England or any of these other countries in NATO going to be extra on alert, which can create this law of unintended consequences where somebody overreacts and somebody does something that is unnecessary because of these stupid realignments that didn't need to take place?
I don't think it's going to come to that. I think it's
How do you know?
because I think when it comes to the nuclear question is a very, I mean, it's the end, and most countries realize that, and a lot of people are not willing to go to that extent because everybody, regardless of the country, knows what that means. What we will probably see are pushback on a small scale. For example, you travel a lot to Europe. Well, they may put a visa imposition on you, and they may say, okay, you want to travel to Spain, to France, to England. That visa is now going to cost you, Bob, $100 to get into Europe. And as an American, your hotel stay is going to cost you more money. So from a consumer point of view, that's how the Europeans can push back.
I'm talking something much more existential than an extra whatever it's going to cost me to go to Europe. I'm talking about human nature. We look at these discussions, whether it's ours or anybody else's, are looking at the behavior of nation states and how these entities these false constructs called nations, are going to behave, but they're all structured by humans underneath it all. And humans are intensely fallible. We know that from history after history. So to be so sanguine to say it's not likely to happen, you don't know that. I don't know that. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it is more likely to happen, I think, when you destabilize what has been stable for a long amount of time, what has been a given or an understood. People are people, and people are fallible, and people are emotional, and people get triggered by far less when the steady ground that they've been standing on has suddenly been shifted.
And how would that happen in the worst case scenario? Let's take it up to the nth degree. Give me a
I'll give it to you.
worst case scenario.
Ukraine is losing the war.
Right.
And the British and the other Europeans send troops in to help them. And then Russia, now we have European troops in Ukraine with weapons. What is Russia going to do?
My guess, and this is only an uneducated guess, is that Russia will do what they have done in the past, is they'll try and get recruits. I mean, it didn't work out so well with the North Koreans, but they've gotten Africans into for combat.
How about if they threaten European cities? How about if they say, if you send English troops and French troops and German troops into this battle, we're going to attack your cities because this is an attack on Mother Russia. I think you're being a little pie in the sky. Already when the British said they were going to send troops in, then Trump said that is a declaration of war.
Right.
But it's okay to send North Korean troops in, but you can't send British troops in. And getting back to the isolation, as you said, it's good America. We tried that, Ardina, in 1930s. We had an isolation government that did not want to get in a war in Europe because they were experiencing World War I. And we are just lucky that Germany attacked Russia and Japan attacked us, because we would not have won the war. Because if those two events don't happen and we stay on the sidelines, England falls and Germany occupies all of Europe, and we are isolated in the world because we wanted to not get involved again. The second question is, what do you think the people in Taiwan think if Trump thinks that the Ukrainians started the war? When Xi invades them, well, they're only going to take their people back. They really were Chinese people and part of China. So if he wants to take it back, it's okay. Don't you understand? This has a domino effect. When America pulls away, the other guys say, well, there's no consequences. Let's go get what we want. And I'm afraid of that.
Another
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say another possibility is, so Russia doesn't fire a nuclear missile into Ukraine as the French troops move in there to defend their border to help them out, but decides, as he's very, very possibly or capable of doing, he just takes out a nuclear reactor, spreading a cloud across Europe. I
It
mean,
already happened with Chernobyl. It already happened.
well, it came this close, I think, to releasing nuclear fallout into the atmosphere, which, by the way, can blow across the world. I mean, on currents of air, who knows what it does to us? But the law of unintended consequences, of unseen outcomes, is what you have to be really, really careful about when when we downplay these possibilities, because anything can go, especially when you're dealing with personality types like this. I mean, you're talking about a sociopath here cozying up to a sociopath over there, plain and simple. So you tell me how dependable it is when you have two sociopaths collaborating. Anything goes.
I looked at Pravda last. I read English Pravda, and the headlines was the U.S. and Russia have never been so close. That's the headline in Pravda.
Yeah.
Can you imagine World War II? Hitler and Roosevelt have formed an alliance. They've never been so close. Now we can invade all the countries. I mean, do we learn the lessons of history? A guy named Chamberlain made peace with Hitler. It lasted a year. We stayed out of the war. This is recurrent human nature. And if we don't stand up to bullies, the outcome is going to be much worse when we have to fight the bullies. In my opinion, I think
human beings. That's what that is at the basis of all of this. Back to your comments about Germany earlier, Vic. When you think about Germany, I mean, as horrific as they were, you can almost understand the rationale for them having elected a dictator, because their economy was in a disastrous state, right? Everybody knows that inflation was insane over in Germany after World War One, and a rather harsh resolution to that war that crippled them. So you can almost understand it, just from a macro perspective, why people would resort to these kinds of foolish extremes. Here, there's really no reason for this guy to be here. America, as I said before, was already great. The country was already on pretty solid footing overall. But I don't know. It just perplexes the hell out of me how blind people can be.
Because the country wasn't on the country was on solid footing for people who were comfortable. If you talk to somebody in Appalachia, if you talk to somebody in older people in Harlem, the country was never on solid footing.
Poverty levels were down lower than they'd been in a long time. Life expectancy is up. It's not to say that things are great in Appalachia. Of course not. Appalachia needs, I mean, there are inherent structural issues down there that have to be addressed, that I'm all in favor of addressing. But overall, this is not a third world country. People are doing overall much better in this country, and have been all along. The stock market, yes, benefits people who can be in the stock market, all-time high. Murder rates down, border crossings down, by the way, substantially at the end of Biden's term. So people, being in the business of suggestion, that's what I do for a living as a hypnotist. You can see how impressionable people are, how easily swayed they are to believe that, things aren't really that good for you. You can, yes.
Prices go up. There was real inflation in the world. There was real inflation. The border was out of control for 3 of the years he was in power. People got tired of that. Inflation and the border were the weak links of the Democratic Party. And enough people switch. Bob, it's only 5 or 10% that say, listen, things are expensive. And all these people are running around in America illegally, and we're paying for them. Whether it's right or wrong, we get the Democrats, by not acknowledging the issue of inflation, by not saying we got to deal with illegal immigration, they gave ammunition to the Republicans. And enough people said, oh, this guy's going to stop it. And that's how an election goes from 51 to 49 to 51 to 49 this way. A couple of people don't vote. So, Bob, it's not like they were out of their minds. They were rejecting the Democratic position and felt themselves personally either at risk or was costing them more money. And I think, as the Germans did, it was inflation. It wasn't terrible in America. Everybody, no one was out of work. We didn't have people out of work. People were not dying in the middle class. But when they went shopping, you go to buy, you've been in restaurants, you and I have been in restaurants, Bob, it's gotten expensive. It's gone much higher than any other item in our lives. And that's what people put on the table every day, food.
But inflation was down to about pre-pandemic levels when
But the prices are still elevated, Bob. It went from 0 to 20%, and now it's 23% or 26. It's not like it went down. It just didn't go up any further. But we've set the prices very high now.
And it had gone down, and border crossings were down. But I agree with you. It's really about salesmanship and the Democrats' ineptitude when it comes to selling, because you didn't hear them talk nearly enough about the positives in this economy and border crossing and crime and so on. I'm not saying it was as good as it was at other times in our economy, but it was a lot better. So people, if you tell people that they're feeling bad and you don't give them counter evidence to suggest that they're better than they actually have been told they're feeling, the bad guys the people with those negative messages get through. That so it's a failure on the part of Democrats, no doubt about it. I'm agreeing with you. But overall, this country has it better. We're still the envy of the rest of the world. America was always great. It could have been better, of course. It can always be better, but that's where the Democrats fell down. Go ahead, Ardina. I'm sorry.
Well, America has been great for a variety of reasons. Number one, the Constitution. I don't want to say melting pot. I would say tolerance of a lot of cultures and how people blend, how people mix, how we conduct ourselves on a daily basis. But at the same time, you look at cities, for example, like Detroit, which was a city that was thriving because of the auto industry. Detroit got so bad that at one point you could buy houses in Detroit for $10 because it's a city that just was decimated by the auto industry leaving and nothing to replace it. So, how do you appease those people? How do you appease those people who have nothing? And this is happening in cities all across the country. The coal miners in West Virginia, not that I'm pro coal mining, but you take away coal mining, and what happens to this? What happens to these guys? Where do they go? The coal miners have been in that occupation for 2, 3, 4 generations. You take that away, and what do you give them? Nothing. Those are the people that voted for Trump because they said everything that we've had, everything that we hold dear to us, has been taken away from us. Then you see Harris being touted at these Hollywood dip and sips and the latte people, and it doesn't mesh with the people in the trenches who voted for Trump, and this is one of the reasons why Trump won.
And meanwhile, I just was in the supermarket yesterday. A dozen eggs, $11.95. Now that Trump's been president, you're talking about a guy who is decimating the healthcare protections for America in terms of the CDC with the likes of Bobby Kennedy. We're seeing bird flu starting to swirl, which is going to raise the price of eggs even more. I'm sure you're seeing measles cases going up. All of this has an economic effect. So all of this hollow rhetoric that I'm the one who's going to fix it. Things were so bad, I'm coming in, I'm going to fix it. Bullshit. It's going to get worse. Number of people who are becoming unemployed. The numbers in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin now, the governor of Virginia, has egg on his face, because 145,000 people in one of these cuts is taking place. 145,000 layoffs will take place in Virginia. High percentage of federal workers there. What's that going to do to Virginia's economy? So, all of it's all nonsense. Again, I'm not sugarcoating anything. The Democrats have some serious answering to do, but at the same time, This guy is no solution. This is nonsense.
Bob, I think what you intimated is that the shit will hit the fan.
Yes.
The things that we ran on are not going to happen. We are not going to have a good economy because the problem is that if he puts tariffs on things, they're going to be more expensive, not less expensive.
Exactly.
Sure.
All these hundreds of thousands of people getting laid off, wait till the unemployment rate goes up and prices go up. And then the average American who voted for him because they didn't like the way things were, and they thought it was all these illegal aliens that were causing their problem, even though most of us never saw one, we thought that now they're gone. Okay, they're gone. We can't blame them anymore. And now prices are higher and people are unemployed. So what has he done? What has he done for America? The bottom line is, Bob, we're going to have to go through a crash, and the shit's going to have to hit the fan because they have all of the organs of power they have. The three branches of government. They got the Supreme Court, maybe in their pocket, I hope not, but the courts so far have been. They got the Congress and the presidency. So there's nobody to blame anymore. We can't blame anybody else. And further down the road, as the Democrats remain impotent, that eventually he's going to have to own the crap that he's created. The only salvation may be that we have to go through a serious international, maybe we have to be attacked, maybe something really terrible has to happen before the people wake up. I don't think it'll happen by you and I talking about it,
But
or the fact.
But knowing these players that we're dealing with Trump and his minions, they're probably factoring all this massive public unrest that is likely to happen when prices get out of hand or people are unemployed. And what they'll do is they'll use it as a pretext for martial law, changing the structure of this country even more severely. So that's in a sense, I think they're waiting for it. I think they're looking to create it. Remember, this is the guy who talked about during those demonstrations in D.C. Can't we ask, I think, Milley or one of the leading generals, why can't we just shoot him in the leg? This is a guy who doesn't know this concept of protecting the citizenry. It's whatever suits him. So, so there may be an uprising, but it will be at what cost? It will be bloody. It will be damaging. The Constitution will have been shredded, and we become perhaps a few notches lower than where we are now.
Bob, that may be the outcome, but I'm going to tell you that I think the real damage is going to manifest 6 months to a year from now. A lot of the things that he said he was going to correct will not be corrected.
Exactly. That's what's going to happen. So it's going to be, I don't think that you're going to have martial law. I mean, the resistance is already rising.
He's getting rid of all the generals who would have opposed him, Ardina. That's part of what he's doing. He's taking out all of the inspector generals, the actual military generals, the people who can hold this system of checks and balances in place. He's getting rid of anybody who's not a loyalist. That's what all of those appointments I mentioned before are about. They're not about competency. They're about their incompetence, but they're loyalists to him. That's all that matters to this guy.
Republican Party will abandon him when it becomes clear that they're not going to get reelected. When they see the threat of their age, they're like in Virginia. If you have a couple 100,000 people unemployed in Virginia, the economy crashes. Do you think Youngkin is going to be reelected as governor or run as senator? What's he going to run on? The economy's crashed terribly. Ultimately, the politicians only are interested in getting reelected. And if the shit hits the fan and they look like they're not going to get elected, they will turn against Trump.
Yeah, they'll run.
Then.
And there are not a number of Republicans, but there are a few Republicans that are already saying, "Whoa, wait a minute, you can't do that." So it's
which one said what? What are you talking about specifically, Ardina?
There has been pushback on Kennedy. There has been pushback on Kash Patel's appointment.
They approved him.
Yes, they approve them, but there are Republican voices that are saying, "Wait a second, you can't do that."
The voice is the vote, and they voted for him.
Republican voted for them, except for McConnell, was the only vote.
Who's leaving anyway? So what does he care?
Well, that's exactly
that tells you that they are feckless. But when their reelection is threatened, I can promise you, when they see the handwriting on the wall, the Republican congressman, they will turn on a heartbeat because they're not loyal to anybody. They're only loyal to getting elected. They don't love Trump. They have no use for Trump either, but they got to ride the train or they'll be off the train. That's what it's about.
The only pushback of any kind that I've seen on balance was just yesterday when a number of senators, Murkowski, this guy from North Carolina, I think it is, and about three or four other Republicans couldn't help but be outraged about Trump's comments about Zelensky being a dictator and having started the war. I mean, you talk about how insane that is, right? To be so counterfactual to what everybody knows, everybody saw with their own eyes, and even these otherwise, Heil the leader, sycophantic Republicans had to say something. That's about the most I've seen, and that was barely any kind of profile and courage. Barely.
But they're also speaking out about, Trump has made rumblings about going after Medicare and Medicaid. And there are some Republicans that are saying, no, wait a second, you can't do that. So I think when you get to hot button issues like that, then you're going to see more and more Republicans telling him you cannot do that. You're going to see a stronger pushback.
Ardina, I love your optimism, but I don't see it this way. I really don't. I just don't.
You know what the Democrats have to do? The Doge attempt to reduce the deficit is a real Ponzi scheme. The amount of money that they're going to get from all this stuff they're doing is maybe a couple of $100 billion.
Yeah.
A budget deficit of $2 trillion. So if they want to give themselves a tax break and they don't want to cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, they cannot do anything but raise the deficit through the roof. And somebody suddenly putting a microscope on the money they're saving with all these cuts. They've been inflated. There was just one that said, "Oh, all these people 150 years old are getting so." It's a crock of nuts. It is just. I was watching a guy yesterday. He was saying we're going to save $2 trillion and give the American people $200 billion. And at least Cuomo on the radio or TV said, so far you've saved peanuts. Where are you going to get $2 trillion? Show me the money, like that great Jerry Maguire movie, Show Me the Money. Remember that movie with about a football player? Maguire was, and the guy says, I want my money, Jerry. And he says, Jerry, show me the money. I don't want to hear the bullshit. Show me the money.
Right. I was confusing the title. I was thinking The Color of Money. That was the Paul Newman Right. It was what was the one with Jerry Maguire in it? What was it? It was Jerry Maguire. That was the name of the movie, right?
It was an agent, and one of his football players said, Jerry, show me the money. And I want to see someone, a Democrat, say, show me the money. Give me a list. I want a set of, we're finding all this fraud. Show it to me on paper. They haven't.
There you go. And that'll be the beginning of the unraveling, because the Trump, I think that the Trump machine will start to disintegrate from within. You've got three key players. You've got Trump, Bannon, and Elon Musk. Divergent personalities. The press is already starting to refer to Elon Musk as President Musk. And Trump has never liked anyone who is his rival or who is perceived as his rival. Bannon can't not stand Musk. Bannon is a Trump insider, and Bannon has already made remarks against Musk that are very disparaging. So that in itself is going to be a huge detractor for Trump's governance.
Yeah.
So, from the mouth to God's ears, as they say, Ardina, may they unravel quickly, because the damage that they're doing is profound. And look, one of the other concerns, and I think maybe we should start wrapping up, but just this intrusion into these government agencies through Doge, through this guy who is sending his teenagers into the deepest bowels of the U.S. government to perhaps take information that they should never have their hands on. I mean, just immature, inexperienced, wisdom lacking incels. This is, what damage are these guys doing behind the scenes? I wouldn't put it beyond Trump or Musk or any of their compatriots to just pilfer, and take out of the system. If they have some way with the various technologies that are available to Elon Musk, siphon a few bucks here, a few bucks there from each person. Who knows? Who knows? Is anything really beyond the scope of possible with these people?
Well, the issue with them is first of all, they weren't vetted. So what's to stop them from selling out information to
Russia.
foreign entity? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
what's concerning? These are 19-year-old kids. 19. They're not even old enough to drink in the state of New York.
Right.
They can barely drive. But these are kids who could be vulnerable to outside influence.
You
And
know,
I think those issues are going to be raised.
you know, you've got a problem when one of them is nicknamed themselves Big Balls, right?
Right.
Is that not telling you something in and of itself? Like this is who we're letting into the inner sanctum of this system.
It's absolute hubris. And we've all been 19 and we all thought that we could conquer the world. I mean, fortunately I guess we managed to maneuver through our egos in a good way, but for a kid who's been given that kind of responsibility, that kind of power, it's disconcerting, to say the least.
To say the least, it is beyond disconcerting. I can't help but say that. Yes, Vic.
This comment, Bob, because I went to a lecture a number of years ago by a fellow who wrote a book called Nazi Land. His father lived in Poland, and he did a lot of research on the transition from democracy to Nazism. And I asked him a question. I said, Hitler wrote his plan in the book Mein Kampf, what he was going to do.
Yeah.
I said, why didn't the German intellectuals who supported him, didn't they object to what he said? They knew what was coming down. So that was a little excessive, but everyone has their exaggerations. So we ignored it and we just figured, he's just blowing off steam. He wrote it down, he delivered it, and the rest is history.
Yeah, yeah.
And as Santayana said, those who fail to learn the lessons of history are condemned to repeat them. And that's
Bob, that's a great way to end it. I think we're there now.
okay. I love you guys. Thank you for a vibrant. Ardina, were you going to say something else? I'm sorry.
I was saying I was being facetious. I was saying it's a rep. It's a rap.
Rap.
All right. Let's have a little rap music to end it with.
Next week, good to have the boys in the band, the boys and girls in the band back together again, playing our new greatest hit. So we'll post it, and thank you again to Ardina Seward and Vic Sternberg, two incredible people. And next week, we'll do it again.
Bob, I want you to make a shirt up. I got to find a shirt. I'm really thinking about this. Give me liberty or give me Trump. I think it's got some power.
My slogan that I've got to get printed up is "Make America Good Again."
Yeah.
No, but I like honestly, Bob. But I like Vic's idea. Give me.
I like it too. I love it.
All right, guys. I'm gonna get a shirt made up. I'm gonna make three of them. Each of us is gonna get. I'm gonna go to the health club wearing that shirt just to get comments from people. I mean that. You'll see me. I'll photograph myself.
The original. No disrespect intended, but the original Big Balls is this guy right here.
Indeed.
All right, we're gonna do it, guys.
All right. Okay.
Take care.
All right, guys. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. It's great. Dina, take care.
Okay.